Hi, this is David Mastio, California editor for the Center Square, and this is California in Focus. As always, I'm joined by Kenneth Schrupp, a California reporter for the Center Square. Today we're talking about political giving by the professors and administrators of the University of California system. How are you doing today, Kenneth?
Hey, David. I'm doing pretty well. It's nice to be interviewing you today.
Glad to do it this way for once.
So, David, you have a surprising story here on one of the Democratic Party's top donors. Who is it, and how much did they give in the last election cycle?
It is the professors and administrators of the University of California system, and they gave in the 2020 election cycle nearly $20 million, $19.8 million. 97% of that went to Democrats.
So how is this data collected? How do we know who's giving what?
When you make a donation of more than $50 to a political candidate or a party or a PAC, you have to fill out a little form that says who you are, what your address is, where you work, and other information about yourself so that it can be collected and compiled into a database by an organization called the Federal Election Commission. And it is made most easily accessible by an organization called OpenSecrets.org, which organizes it and verifies it and makes it available nationwide.
Okay, let's get back to the UC system. So how much have UC donations grown since 2016?
In 2016, they gave nearly $5 million. By 2020, that had nearly quadrupled to $19.8 million. And if they continue on that trajectory, they could reach $80 million in the 2024 election cycle, which we are just getting into the swing of with the Iowa caucuses in a few days.
But do you really think they can continue growing their donations at this rate?
I didn't think they could grow from 5 million to 20 million before. So it doesn't seem to be a stretch that they could do that again. You have to remember the stakes of this election. If you're liberal and you oppose Donald Trump, you think Donald Trump is the most dangerous presidential candidate on the ballot in your lifetime. The most ardent partisans are going to tap their wallets more than they ever have before. I wouldn't be surprised if it reaches 80 million.
Turning back to the UC donation balance, you said 97% of donations by the UC system go to Democrats. Do you have any idea why this is?
Well, I talked to Jennifer Cabaney, editor of the College Fix, and she says that older classically liberal professors who tended to support free speech, academic freedom, and intellectual diversity have retired, and they're being replaced with younger, more radical scholars who use the classroom for activism and indoctrination rather than education. These new scholars tend to be far more politically active, she argues. She says that this has turned the schools into echo chambers, and that 97% number is really kind of amazing. It wasn't always this way. You know, as recently as the year 2000, there were universities in the United States where a majority of donations went to Republicans. But I've been doing these stories in Oregon and New Mexico and Missouri and Kansas and other places around the country, Harvard. And this 97% number is really common at universities around the country.
Are there any departments or colleges in the UC system with a more sizable Republican donation contingent?
Well, at the UCLA Medical School, 14% of donations went to the Republican Party, but that was only $7,000. There's no place else in the system where giving to Republicans was even 5%.
So, conversely, are there any campuses or departments where Republican donations were non-existent?
At the Berkeley and Hastings law schools, there were no donations to Republicans, which is really an interesting question to me because the judiciary nationwide is dominated by Republicans. The Supreme Court is majority Republican. In many states around the country, there are Republican-appointed majorities in the state courts. And how do you learn to address those Republican judicial leaders from teachers who 100% agree with the Democratic Party?
The question I have then next is, which of the campuses gave the most?
In 2020, the institutions within the UC system that gave the most were UC San Francisco, which gave $3.8 million, UC Berkeley, which gave $3.1 million, and UCLA with $3 million.
Do these numbers include all public university staff in California?
No, they don't. There's a Cal State system that is separate from the University of California system, and there's also the community colleges. I didn't look at their donations. I only looked at the University of California system. So these numbers could be even larger if you looked at higher education across the state. Stanford, a private school, is also a big seven-figure donor to Democrats.
Well, David, thank you very much for your time. If you like our podcast, be sure to give us a follow or rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And be sure to visit us at thecentersquare.com.
Knowledge is power, and you deserve to know what happens in your state government. That's why the Center Square's reporting zeroes in on state authorities publishing stories that show where your money goes and who spends it. The Center Square gives power to the taxpayer by tracking politicians' use of the people's money and demanding transparency from state-run agencies. This is how the Center Square equips you, the American taxpayer, to hold your state government accountable. Sign up now for your state's Center Square newsletter at thecentersquare.com.